This afternoon, I am in Laramie, Wyoming, speaking with Timothy G. Kearley, who was professor of law and director of the George W. Hopper Law Library of the University of Wyoming. Tim, you were there in that position from 1993 until you retired about 2 years ago in 2015. Tim, you were also an adjunct faculty member of the International Studies program beginning in 2002 here at the law school. And you continue to teach now on a part-time basis and as a professor of law emeritus.
All right.
Okay. It's our custom, Tim, to begin these conversations by learning a little bit about you outside of your professional image and so on. Could you tell us a little bit about your life, perhaps today and even when you were younger?
Sure. Yeah, I was born and raised in and around Chicago. I like to tell my students I was born in the first half of the last century, November of '49.
Barely made it.
Yeah, that's right. But it's quite impressive to the students. So yeah, I grew up.
The tricky thing is some of them will not have been born even in the last century much longer.
We no longer share all the common cultural references that I was accustomed to. But yeah, so I grew up in Chicago until I was about 10. And then we moved out to Oak Park, which is the first suburb immediately west of Chicago. So basically still more or less in the city. And just sort of normal, sort of lower middle class, working class upbringing. Nothing terribly exciting, but it was still back in the day when you could ride your bike around and leave it someplace and expect to find it when you got back. And
in one piece.
Yeah, and sort of a leave it to beaver sort of childhood. So yeah, nothing terribly exciting about it, but it was a great place to grow up. Yeah.
So you grew up there and eventually ended up here. Well, in between, there's a little bit of story, so we'll get to that in a minute. But before we do, can I ask if there are any hobbies or special passions that you occupy time with now, especially now that you're retired, at least sort of retired?
Right. Well, of course, I read a lot. Both my wife and I were librarians, so our house is full of books, and I've usually got 3 or 4 books going, something on history and maybe a novel and a mystery, and I'm a big Woodhouse aficionado, so I'm always rereading something of his to sort of lighten after the end of the day. And then my wife and I enjoy traveling, so we've been doing a lot more of that. Visiting libraries wherever we go, of course. And then in my retirement, I've taken up track and field.
Track and field in retirement?
I
That
do,
sounds like a young man's pursuit.
Well, it's an interesting thing. It's a whole, I could go on about this for a long time, but there's a whole new, sort of a subculture. There's masters track and field. So I got one of the UW decathletes to show me how to throw the javelin and to sprint. So now I'm a regular Sharpie. I have my own blocks that I got off of eBay, and so I travel around various places doing masters track and field. Track meets USA Track and Field Association and senior games.
Well, they tell us, the physicians and other medical experts that at our stages in life, and I'm afraid we're at a fairly similar stage of life, a little exercise is not only good for you, but it's probably essential. So it sounds like you take that seriously enough.
Yeah, so it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, sort of beginning to change the focus back to your professional career and that sort of thing. Can I ask you about your degrees? You have 3, as I understand.
Right. First 2, from the University of Illinois. I had a BA in sociology back in '71, and then I worked for a couple years, went back and got my law degree as of '76 from Illinois. And then I went out to the University of Washington, this Law Librarianship program, and got that in '77, right after law school.
You had a fairly, shall we say, notorious group of folks in that class. Pretty much everyone's gone on well in the field, including yourself. Yeah. Now, your mentor there, I'm a little ahead of myself a little bit, presumably would have been Marion Gould Gallagher, for whom the association's award is named.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a privilege and really very interesting to be there while she was still head of the program. It was great fun.
Actually, speaking of mentors, do you have any others you consider mentors in your early career or even more recently?
Yeah, I would say there would be a couple of them. The reason I really got into the field was that I worked in the law library at the University of Illinois when I was a student there.
Mm-hmm.
My original plan had been to get the JD and then to go on and get a PhD in a social science like political science or sociology and teach at the university level.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my wife is very thankful that I changed plans and stopped at the JD. But the main reason I did that was I realized when I was a student at Illinois that you could teach if you were a law librarian.
Uh-huh.
And one of the people on the staff there at the time, I'm not sure if she was actually head of public services there yet or not, was Carol Boast, who was a really excellent librarian, a very enthusiastic person. So I would say that she was sort of an early mentor, even before I was a professional myself and I was a law student.
I think you have sort of just kind of explained how it was you discovered law librarianship as a field into which you decided to go after you got your law degree, but could you flesh that out just a bit? And specifically, did anyone, perhaps Carol Boast or somebody, play a role in helping you come to the decision to go into this field?
Yeah, Carol definitely did play a role in that. I think I started working in the summer after my first year.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a number of occasions when I'd work weekends or evenings when I was more or less by myself. So I got some experience and practice, actually doing sort of minor sort of reference questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured I kind of liked that, and I've always been a book lover. But then getting to know Carol more and talking with her about what the opportunities were in the profession, she let me know that the teaching aspects and the research aspects were there so that I wouldn't really have to go on and get a PhD in something else. So that really was what sort of got me.
So as you
going in
say,
that
your
direction.
wife was probably glad not to have you continue in school and perhaps racking up further student debt.
Right. No more waitressing for her.
Yes, or whatever.
Right.
Well, you finally wrapped up your studies out in Seattle at the University of Washington in that program for teaching us to be law librarians.
Right.
And then you came back to Cook County Law Library in Chicago, back to your home roots as a reference librarian. And you were there for about a year, I think.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that move and what you did.
Yeah. That was pretty accidental. I mean, I ended up there mainly because I had done my field work there. Part of the law librarianship program was doing field work. And I wanted to go someplace where I wouldn't have to pay more money just to live, and so I still had friends and family back in Chicago. And I can't remember if I actually found that fieldwork position or if Marianne found it for me. In any event, I ended up at the Cook County Law Library instead of, say, Northwestern or the University of Chicago. And when I came time to graduate, they had a position open, and I knew that I wanted to go back to Illinois just to take the bar exam, because I hadn't done that because I had gone right from graduation onto the law librarianship program. So I figured, well, it was always sort of a known situation, and I could, and Bill Powers, who was the director there, said I could, in my off hours, I could study for the bar exam, because I worked a fair number of evenings and weekends, so I could study them. So it seemed like a good situation.
Powers was a very well-known colleague in our field. Yeah. Can you tell us anything about him that perhaps during that era?
Yeah, I didn't get to know him really well, but he was a really interesting guy, and he was very well connected in the law library field. And he was a good mentor for me. I didn't get to know him really well, like I said, so I didn't think of him immediately as a mentor. But he was good in the sense that one of the things he had me doing on that job, even though I was mainly a reference librarian, was some administrative sorts of things, like doing some collection analysis and collection development sorts of things.
Somehow, I suspect later in your career, that information that you learned then was going to be rather helpful.
Yeah, and actually, their collection, I haven't been there for a long time, but their collection at the time was really quite good.
It was a very major law library.
Yeah.
I assume it still is, but with these troublesome times we're in financially, who knows, I guess.
Because I know it was funded at the time by part of the filing fees. And of course, there's tons of litigation in Cook County So it was quite well funded,
Mm.
and it was a good experience, good first job because we had heavy use by attorneys, law students, and pro se people.
Mm.
So a fair number of difficult patrons and a wide variety of interesting sort of questions. Never a dull moment. So yeah, it was a very good first position.
Well, 1978, you left Cook County Law
Right.
Library and moved downstate a ways,
Right.
not too far, I guess, to the University of Illinois College of
Right.
Law, and you were the assistant law librarian and assistant professor of law at that
Right.
time. Assistant law librarian for our modern readers is sort of the equivalent of assistant or associate director today in today's terminology. And then you were there for several years, and you moved up to associate law librarian and associate professor of law.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about that part of experience?
Yeah.
And I'll just ask out of the blue, was Rick Searles the library director at that time?
Not when I first got there. no.
Okay, so did he come
Yeah.
while you were there?
He came when I was there.
Okay.
Yeah, so what happened there was I wasn't necessarily looking to leave the Cook County Law Library because I
Oh.
was enjoying the experience there. But when I was at the University of Illinois, in addition to having worked there as a student, I took a lot of foreign comparative and international law classes. I was always one of those law and people, so I took Asian law and Soviet law and comparative law, things like that. And so Chin Kim was the associate director and foreign comparative and international law librarian there at the time. So he happened to leave when I was just finished up my first year at Cook County. And since people in the library and people on the faculty both knew me, they contacted me and said, we're going to have this opening, and are you interested? And I jumped at it.
That goes a long way
Yeah.
with the young guy's ego, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. And plus, it just seemed like a dream job to me because they wanted me to learn all about foreign law and comparative law and international law. And they made it clear they wanted me to brush up on my German and learn some more foreign languages. And it sounded like great being paid to do stuff that I would enjoy doing anyway. So that's why I left Cook County and went to Illinois. So I didn't really do so much administration there other than I had a small foreign comparative international law department. So when I first went there, it was more sort of the foreign comparative international aspect of it, plus reference. I did regular reference work.
I think we all had to take a hand in that over the years.
Right, and to answer your question, when I first went there, Ed Hess was the
Ed Hess
director.
was still there, yes.
Right. So Ed was still there. He was close to retirement. I think he was there for another maybe 3 years when I was there.
Okay.
And then I think Bob Baring came through at maybe for about a year. I think we overlapped for about a year when I was there as head of public services. And then he went on to Berkeley. And so then basically Carol Boast then became head of public services. And so I was happy to work with her. And I think also Lynn Foster was there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I overlapped with Nancy Johnson as well.
So you actually had the chance to work with a number of colleagues
Yeah.
who themselves have gone
Yeah.
on very well in our field.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a great situation. So like I said, when I first got there, Ed was still the director, and I mainly was doing foreign comparative and international law.
Okay.
And then when you asked before about mentors, I would say in my foreign comparative and international law incarnation, Dolph Sprudz at the University of Chicago was really my mentor.
Yeah, he was one of the
Yeah.
European scholars that
Right.
had come over somewhere around World War II and
Right.
went into our field and
Yeah.
really made some huge improvements to our collections of international
Right.
comparative law and our understanding of what became or has become a major part of the practice of law in this country now with so much international trade and so on agreements.
Right. Yeah, he was a fascinating guy, and he was, as I said, he was sort of an classic old world sort of
Yeah.
gentleman. He had high standards and
Yeah.
very detail oriented, but a very generous sort of person. And so when I first started doing that job, I had no idea what I was doing. So I ended up calling Dolph a lot I'm not sure how I ever got connected with him in the first place, but he sort of took me under his wing, and he got me involved in the International Association of Law Librarians, and just generally sort of taught me how to do what I was supposed to be doing.
I had a connection like that to one of those people, Ivan Sipkoff, who was
Oh, yeah.
at the Library of Congress.
Mhm.
And I don't know, Ivan just sort of took a liking to me, I guess,
Right.
because he was helpful, and although I didn't go into international comparative law, he was still a very interesting person to know, and he used to give us books for the library that he had gotten to review, and so it supplemented our book budget a tiny bit
Right.
too, which I thought was good
Right, right,
at the time.
yeah.
Well, you had an interesting experience actually while you were still technically at the University of Illinois Law Library, and that was you were a Fulbright
Yeah,
scholar.
right.
You want to talk a little bit about that? And I trust
Yeah.
your German was up to snuff because that's where it was.
Yeah, well, that was interesting because German was the language I take in high school. I took French in college, but I knew that German was the strength of the foreign collection at Illinois. We had a history of having some German connections and faculty members who were either native Germans or interested in particular in German law. So first year after I got there, I think that next summer I got a scholarship to study at a Goethe Institute in Blaubeuren, Germany. So that helped get my German up to speed. And then my sabbatical project, which was the Fulbright connection, was doing an update on Zlatitz's Guide to Foreign Legal Materials German. So that was part of the Parker School of Law, Parker School of Foreign and Comparative Law series that operated out of Columbia. And so Zlatitz had done the original one. It had been many years before that. I can't remember exactly, maybe at least 15 years, and so a lot of things had changed. And so they asked me if I was interested in updating that. And so I applied for sabbatical and I applied for that Fulbright research grant in order to do that, to go and actually use German collections to update that material. So it was a great experience. Aside from just the general experience of living abroad for 7 months with my wife and 4-year-old son, being connected to the Fulbright organization was a lot of fun, because then they paid for us to come to Bonn for a weekend and to meet the sort of upper mid-level bureaucrats in the German government, and to visit the German, I think it was the German Constitutional Court. And then later that year we went to Berlin while it was still divided. So that was a great experience. We got to take a bus into East Berlin, go actually through Checkpoint Charlie and into East Berlin. So yeah, that was a wonderful experience.
Well, this was just 2 or 3 years before the Soviet system collapsed.
Right.
So you must have seen some, well, maybe you didn't, but I would assume there might have been some signs that change might be approaching.
There weren't really. It was interesting because that was 86, 87.
Yeah.
So when we left in 87, that is quite interesting, because the wall fell in 89,
Yeah.
but it still seemed very solid at the time. One of the particularly interesting things that happened at the time was the guy I got to be co-author with me, who was somebody who was a German student, a former student I had known at the University of Illinois' Master's in Law program. And that was actually, to backtrack for a second, that was one of the more interesting aspects of that position at Illinois, was that they had a really active master's program for foreign lawyers, usually very young lawyers who had just graduated or maybe had a year or two of experience. And so I got to know a lot of foreign students and maintained connections with them. So this person who had been one of those students happened to have grown up in Berlin, and his father was a professor at the Free University, and their house was in that little peninsula in West Berlin that's stuck into East Germany. So Wolf happened to be in Berlin when I was there, so he took us to his parents' house, and we got to be right up close and personal, right up against the wall. And there was no sign at all whatsoever. Nobody there was talking about, oh yeah, this is going to fall soon. It seemed like a fairly permanent institution. Yeah.
Well, when it came, it was surprisingly fast, and it was surprisingly without too much bloodshed. Who would have ever anticipated such a event, I guess.
Yeah, I think the right
And
people were in place.
Yeah, well, Gorbachev and the Soviet Union
Right.
certainly seemed to take a leading role.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Whatever. Well,
Yeah.
we're going afield,
Yeah, right.
as I'm prone to do when I misdirect these things a bit. So to sort of get back to
Yeah.
your career, Tim, your first role as a director was at Louisiana State University's
Right.
Law Library, starting in 1989.
Right.
Where you were a professor of law at the university. I don't know whether you had one of these titles, but I had some years later a colleague who went there for 1 year to fill in and was named the fanciest title I've ever seen a law librarian have. He was, I think, assistant vice chancellor or something.
No, I missed out on that.
You didn't get that title.
No, but it was an unusual situation because that law school at the time, and I'm not sure if they've changed this, I know they talked about changing this, was a separate campus.
Uh-huh.
Even though it was right there on the LSU main campus, the administrative structure was that it was a separate campus. So the dean of the law school was the chancellor.
Yeah.
Um,
That's probably where
Yeah.
the guy's chancellor title showed
Right.
up.
Right. Well, that was an interesting situation. That sort of takes me back to Illinois for a minute because I had Rick Searles came on after a while there, and he was the director. And after he had been there for a couple of years, I indicated to him, and after I figured I knew what I was doing as foreign, comparative, international law librarian, I asked him if I could take on more administrative responsibilities because I was interested. I had 2 kids by then, and I was looking at the income that was made by a foreign, comparative, and international law librarian compared to the income of a law library director. So I was thinking along those lines for the future. So I was associate director there at Illinois for several years. And Lance Dixon happened to leave LSU for Stanford. And of course, Lance was civil law trained. He was a South African. And given Louisiana's legal system and the strength of their connection to civil law and the tremendous civil law collections that they have there, they were interested in getting somebody who appreciated civil law and who had enough administrative experience for them to believe that they could take over the directorship. So I seemed pretty well suited, and it just so happened too that the outgoing chancellor, dean, was somebody I knew from Illinois, Bill Hawkland,
Oh,
the UCC fellow.
made it easy.
Yeah, so again, I just sort of slipped into that.
Yeah.
So it was a good situation in some ways as far as the fit was concerned. But in other ways, it didn't work out too well for me. It was a much larger organization with pretty much 100% administration, so I didn't get to interact with students the way I had at Illinois.
Yeah, that's the downside of when administration gets to be
Right.
a little too overwhelming, is
Right.
you lose your ties unless you can pick them up in teaching or something
Right.
with the students.
Yeah, and they didn't have any, excuse me, a particular, I'm not sure if Lance taught anything or not, but they certainly didn't have a history of having the library staff involved in teaching like legal research and writing. Because, excuse me, at Illinois I had been teaching legal research for the foreign students. And at LSU I was sort of metaphorically and physically cut off from the students and faculty because of the way the library was situated in respect to the faculty. So that wasn't very appealing. I also came on at the same time as a new dean, and we weren't really a good fit. So I did my 4 years there. And then
You were there a
moved
while.
on. Yeah, I was
Always,
long enough.
yeah.
Yeah. But it was, I mean, they had a good staff, and like I said, the collection was excellent. So there were positive aspects to it. Good food, good music there. But I was ready to move on by the time 4 years was up.
So that was about 1993, and you
Yep.
came here to the University of Wyoming.
Yep, and that was a great fit. Because I could tell.
Settled in, and
Yeah.
here you are. Of course, you're emeritus now, and
Right.
retired from the library, but you were here the rest
Right.
of your career.
Yeah, yeah. No. Well, one of the reasons that I came here, one of the attractive things was that it was so small and informal that people he really couldn't afford to stand on ceremony. And sort of like it was all hands on deck, and they wanted me to be an active faculty member and teach a substantive course as well as be involved in legal research, and also to be involved in committee work.
In other words, if you were going to be a professor,
Right.
you were going to be a real professor.
Exactly.
Just like everybody else.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah, they couldn't afford no dead wood
Yeah.
when you've got a slim staff.
Yeah.
So that was a very attractive thing about coming here. So I developed, and they knew I had this background in foreign, comparative, and international law, so I developed a public international law class to teach here.
Now, they had not had that in the curriculum before, or?
They had international on the curriculum, but I can't remember exactly what it was. I think they had some visitors teaching it. Certainly there was nobody here on the staff when I came who had actually had taught it.
Well, that made it nice
Yeah,
for a
exactly.
new teacher of the subject. Nobody
Right.
would come into your class and could really evaluate what it was you
Right,
were doing.
exactly.
I had the
Right.
same thing with one of my courses.
Right.
Nobody on the faculty knew anything about maritime law.
There you go.
Which I taught.
Right.
Oh, well. So you've been here, you were here for quite a few years, actually.
23, yeah.
Over 23.
Right.
Can you tell us a bit about how the library developed over those years and some of the changes that you were part of and that occurred?
Yeah. It's always been sort of, I'd say traditionally it's been sort of thinly funded, but decently funded. We didn't pretend to be a major research library, and it's a small law school, so we didn't have a lot of boutique sort of classes. We didn't have to have special collections in a lot of esoteric kinds of subjects, but we've always had good natural resources and energy law kinds of environmental law.
I think those would both be natural for
Right.
Wyoming. I mean, it's a big state with both a lot of energy on the ground and a lot of natural resources above ground.
Right.
And probably below ground.
Right. So we had some very good collections, and probably the two main things that I sort of oversaw when I got here were actually classifying the collection, because we had been operating under sort of a homemade system. So we did a reclass using LC, and then I've got compact shelving put into the basement, so we're able to.
Good place for it.
Yes.
Just in case the floor load isn't like what
Right.
you thought it was.
Right. And it's a good dry basement. We're dry here in Wyoming, so not too much of a concern about a stream running underneath us. So those are two big things that we managed to achieve. And other than that, it was mainly the sort of joy of running a very small informal operation where you really got to know all the students and faculty. Because for the first, I think it was at least 3 years, and maybe 4, I taught all 4 sections of legal research for the first year students.
Wow.
So I knew every student in the school. I'd had them in class. And then I shifted up to advanced legal research as we had some personnel changes and so forth.
Did your librarian colleagues get involved in some of that teaching with you, or even take some of the research and writing classes?
Yeah, so now, after a while, the way we changed it over was that our 2 public services librarians each do 2 sections of the first year course, and then the library director does the advanced legal research course, and then another specialized kind of course.
Yeah, I hear similar stories, and time after time when I go around making these visits and doing these conversations for the oral history. So that seems to be much more the norm now than it even was as recently as when I was still active, which was, not that many years ago, 13 or 14.
Right.
So that's been one of the revolutions. You must have also seen the rather much larger impact that digital materials have made on our collections over those years.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful thing because, particularly in my area of research, but for the faculty in general, it's meant that people can do research here that ordinarily, before digital or online resources, they couldn't have done here at the University of Wyoming. So I've been able to do research in Roman law that I would have had to travel, all over the place in order to do. So that's been a great thing. And it's been good just for our physical size. We're not a big place physically, so we've been able to have pack a lot more information in a smaller space. So we haven't had to keep trying to expand the library. So.
Well, your teaching, getting back to that, has also been sort of, you have moved around a bit, even
Right.
while here.
Right.
Because I noted in the background that you've taught in Queensland, Taiwan, and even Seattle.
Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about some of that off the campus kind of
Yeah.
teaching?
Well, at the Queensland, I was thinking about that, and I can't remember exactly how it came to pass, except that when I was at LSU, Terry Hutchinson, who was the law librarian at the Queensland University of Technology, got in touch with me and asked me if I would be interested in teaching legal research down there. So I said sure, and it was their Louisiana's summer, their winter. And so that was kind of nice to get out of Louisiana for the summer and be in a subtropical winter in Queensland. So that was it was a really interesting experience, in part because law is an undergraduate program there, and it hadn't dawned on me when I first started doing that I was dealing with a different kind of student, and I'm afraid that I wasn't terribly successful, not as successful as I would like to have been. Because it hadn't really dawned on me when I was preparing for that I was going to be teaching a different kind of student.
More like 19 and 20-year-olds instead
Exactly.
of 25-year-olds.
Right. So, but it was still quite an interesting experience, and I'm still in touch with Terry. And just being down there and seeing how their legal education system operates, and I did a CLE. That was another learning experience. I agreed to do a CLE the day after I arrived, after a 24-hour trip. So that wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done. Yeah, right.
That must have been a wild experience
Right.
for everybody.
Right. So that was another one of the learning experience for me.
No.
But it was a great deal of fun, and it was good getting to know the other librarians there. And I traveled around. I got to know other librarians. I visited the parliamentary library in Canberra, and they were having, I can't remember what they called their association, but they were having a local library association, or an Australian library association meeting while I was there. So I got to I gave a talk there about law library autonomy, because law libraries there were not autonomous. So anyway, that was an excellent experience. Got to know people and visit other libraries while I was there.
Well, I suppose your teaching then later in Seattle was in Penny Hazelton's course on administration of law libraries.
Right. Yeah. And that was fun. So that was a team taught. That was our entire class of 1977 from the Law Librarianship program. Team taught that.
As I said, I think it was off camera. It was sort of a notorious group, but
Yes.
actually in the right sense of that, you were all quite successful.
Yeah. And then we bonded, and we sort of stuck together that whole time. And so we rented a house together, and we only overlapped, all five of us, for, I can't remember, maybe a week or so. So we all taught different portions of that course. And so that was a great experience, just working with those folks again, and seeing the new students in that time.
And you're all in the process of retiring now.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It seems, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's about time, I guess.
Yeah.
Why not? Now, you also taught at one point in Taiwan.
Yeah.
I think I saw in your background.
Yeah, that was.
What was that all about?
That's connected to my appointment at the in the International Studies program here at the University of Wyoming. And I wish I had gotten hooked into that earlier, because the University of Wyoming had a contract with the Taiwanese Foreign Ministry to have various faculty members from different related sort of international disciplines, like international business and international politics and international law, come and do sort of a short course for their sort of younger mid-level bureaucrats in the Taiwanese government and in Taiwanese industry. So we went to, I can't remember what the name is, basically the high-tech town in Taiwan. Hsinchu comes to mind. And we held the course there. But that was a fascinating experience, in large part because of the high regard that educators are held in the Chinese culture. So I was treated like a demigod there. We were stayed at a fancy hotel, and a limo came to pick me up every day, and a uniformed attendant put his gloved hand on my little head as I sat into the car to make sure I didn't bump my little head. Right. And then on campus, it was, I can't remember the name of the campus, but there was a school there. And so we held it on campus there. And we had a 2-hour lunch hour, and I had my own little living facility there on campus, so I could go lie down, and my lunch would be brought to me in between classes. And then the students were all organized, and so they would, if I filled the board with writing, somebody would jump up and ask me if it was time to erase, so they could erase it for me, and I had to clean part of the board. And they were all organized. They did social activities. My wife accompanied me on that trip, and so they took us all around and went to a Chinese baseball game and a Chinese night market. And they were diligent students too. So it was wonderful.
I suppose the first thing that happened when you came back here is the dean made you an offer you couldn't refuse. If you came back and told the faculty this was the norm and it should be the norm here in Laramie, you might have had your faculty office moved to Cheyenne or something an hour
Well,
east.
exactly. I did relate those experiences to my dean and suggested that I might like my own little place to lie down and have my lunch brought to me for at least next year.
Somehow
So,
you didn't
right.
quite think that was the right
Right.
perk you were going to get, huh?
Right.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Well, getting back more seriously,
Right.
maybe we should move on to your professional involvement. You have an
Okay.
extensive record, not as much with the ELL as such, but with the more international, with the IELL
Right.
and some of the other areas of that sort that deal mostly with the international aspects. Well,
Right.
some with the ELL. You were
Right.
on the advisory committee for the
Right.
Index to Foreign Legal Periodicals
Yeah.
and that
Right.
sort of thing. You were secretary for a while to IALL. Can you tell us a
Right.
bit about some of your professional involvement?
Yeah, and that's actually been one of the most enjoyable and sort of unexpected aspects to my profession, actually, how it sort of turned out. As I think I initially indicated, the IAL connection came through Dolph Sprutes. So with him as my mentor, he got me involved. I think he was president of the IAL for a couple of years. And he got me involved in that and asked me if I'd be interested in being secretary. So that's how I got my foot in the door there. And then I became involved with the IAL's journal, and I edited their new periodicals column. But that ended up being a wonderful experience because, and particularly when I was at Illinois, they were very eager to support that kind of involvement. So they funded me to go to the Tokyo, Freiburg, Budapest for IALL meetings, where I got to meet librarians from all over the world, the librarian of the Hungarian Parliament, and the librarian of the Bundestag, people like that, who I kept up some connections with later. So that was a wonderful experience. And then I was one of the early chairs of the Foreign Comparative and International SIS. That was also very rewarding. One of the things that was becoming of concern at that point was that people like Dolph Sprutes and Igor Kavas, who had come from other countries and were well educated in the legal systems of these other countries, were starting to retire. Excuse me. So the concern was, where's the next generation of foreign comparative and international law librarians coming from?
Yeah, that's right. We didn't have the European source that we had late 30s and into the 40s, 1940s.
Right.
These guys were, as you say, aging out.
Right. So that was one of the things that I was involved with sort of that movement to create some workshops and other kinds of educational programs that would take people with a JD who were just interested and teach them the rudiments, and so they could later self-teach, become reasonably expert in those areas.
This was also the period when American commercial enterprises were becoming much more involved with overseas sources
Right.
and interconnecting the world economically was
Right.
underway. So there was a need in the American legal practice
Right.
for expertise on comparative law and some international law
Right.
as well. So you must have been sort of at the right time and the right place for some of that.
Yeah, and actually I think, I haven't really counted up, but my sense is now that there are probably more foreign comparative and international law librarians than there were back then. That a lot more libraries have developed that, at least as sort of a partial specialty
Yes.
for a reference person.
Yeah,
So,
I've certainly seen it where I was on faculty and
Right.
taught and directed the library. We had one international librarian sort of part-time, but now they've been two. And I think they keep pretty busy.
Yeah.
The little I've picked up since.
yeah.
Well, in addition to your professional service, you another type of professional service, and that is scholarship. You want to talk a little bit about some of your scholarship and writings?
Yeah, that's another area in which I'm really grateful to Illinois, because they were very serious about giving librarians professional status, and that if you were going to have professional status, then you should write. Excuse me. So that was expected, and time was carved out of your schedule for that sort of thing. And so right off the bat, I was,
So they actually gave you, in effect, built into your workday a certain amount of time for that.
Right.
I know a lot of our colleagues sort of fit it in on their own time.
Right. No, so they actually built it in. I mean, it wasn't like I had a calendar where I marked it off, but it was expected,
Yeah.
if they found me back there in my office, doing research, then that was perfectly fine. And so, I developed, we also happened to be a European Communities Depository Library at the time. And so I had to teach myself how to use all this material, and I decided, well, that's something that I can tell everybody else, because a lot of other people were interested in learning how to use European community documents. So that was my first major article. But then, I just sort of got the habit, and I found other topics of interest. Excuse me. Some of it having to do with areas in which I taught. Like I wrote a couple of pieces on international law. But then I just happened to back into a whole second career here at the University of Wyoming when I discovered former Wyoming Supreme Court Justice's manuscript translation of Justinian's Code.
Oh.
And all that, I started actually working on that in 2005, and that has just come to fruition. Just yesterday, I got my copies of the new English translation of Justinian Codex, based on Justice Bloom's, published by the Cambridge University Press.
Well, that is quite a coup on your part. To
Yeah,
be
yeah.
involved in something of that magnitude.
Yeah.
Importance, actually, too.
Yeah, but then it's been a whole second career, like I said, because I found out there was all sorts of interesting little byways to that, learning all about S.P. Scott, who did a previous translation which was very badly received, and who this mystery person was and why he did what he did. And so anyway, learning all about Roman law in the United States and what role it played in the 19th century and then on into the 20th century has been a whole second area of interest to me. That's really sort of kept me invigorated, and that's actually one of the reasons I decided to retire when I did.
So now you can devote more time to this sort of thing. if you
I
want.
didn't, when I was director, I didn't want to short shrift my duties as
You mean
director.
you had your day job?
Right, but I was frustrated because I knew there was all this stuff out there that I wanted to research and write about. So that was one of the things that sort of precipitated it. So that's been a really major part of my career, because that's, like I think I indicated early on, I wanted to be a teacher, faculty member, and
Well,
so
it
it's kept
sounds
me
like
going.
that's sort of, you've evolved around to all of that at the moment.
Yeah.
And at least for the next few years, presumably we'll keep your hand in some of this.
Right, and one of the fascinating things about this more recent area of interest to me was that I've hooked into a whole different field, which is classics. So I've gotten in touch with classicists all over the world, because people, when I was first editing Bloom's manuscript and publishing it online, people got wind of what I was doing. There was sort of a classics underground, apparently. And so, for example, an Augustinian monk from Malta contacted me because he was translating some recently discovered manuscript, which had partially to do with church law, which is written of in Justinian's Code. And so he wanted to see, he could read Latin himself, but he wanted to see what Bloom's take was in English in some of his annotations on this topic. And as a result of that connection with him, I actually went to visit him in Malta and spent a week living in an Augustinian monastery in Malta.
Oh, that must have been a little bit different from, say, the normal hotel.
Yeah, it was a cell. It was, this place had been rebuilt several times, but this particular structure was built in, I think it was the 1600s, and so they had a little door, a slot in the door where the monks used to have their meals slipped to them. So that was a pretty interesting experience, all done as a sort of ad hoc response to this manuscript I discovered.
Well, maybe you have your, as you wind down from your prior duties and so on, completely, maybe you can ramp up a little more on this sort of thing if you want to.
Yeah.
Keep you,
Yeah.
give you more than enough to keep you occupied on this cold, snowy, well, maybe not too snowy in this area because
Right.
you are sort of in the shadow of the mountains, but
Right.
you still can get a few snows in the winter.
Right. Oh,
Something
yeah.
to do around the house.
Right.
So much of it's available online now, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe with on that, we're probably nearing the end of our conversation this afternoon,
Okay.
Tim. But before we do, I want to, as I customarily do, ask if there's anything we've not talked about that you would like to bring up before we conclude.
Well, I guess you probably brought it up, but I guess the main theme as I look back on my career is all of the fantastic experiences I've had a chance to do that I never would have expected when I was starting out in it. And mainly just the relationships that you develop with people. And what a wonderful career, what a wonderful occupation being a law librarian is, because you generally are working with people who are not highly competitive with each other. They're very friendly and helpful and actually supportive and are interested in what you're doing. And so whenever you're on a committee with somebody, it's usually easy to get the work done because everybody's sort of pulling together, and people don't generally give in to petty jealousies, and you just get a chance to meet people from all over the world and have great fun working with them.
I have heard this theme time and again doing these conversations, and it was my own finding as a law librarian. It was a wonderful group of colleagues, including yourself, and it was a good way to earn a living, I thought, for many years.
Yeah.
I suspect will continue to be for some time. It's changing in our libraries, but so be it. Changed a lot in our days. You mentioned early on, when you came here to Wyoming, the cataloging needed to be done in the collection in the normal modern sense, and so you implemented that for the first time. Well, that's change of some magnitude in its own era. Well, maybe on that basis, Timothy G. Kearley, I ought to thank you for your time this afternoon, for taking effort to come here and let me record this interview, video, conversation, whatever I want to call it, for the oral history of law librarianship for the Hein Online database. And in thanking you, I'm of course doing it not just on my own behalf. I've had the pleasure of sitting across the table from you, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodak, and of course Dick Spinelli, our colleagues with whom I have the pleasure of working to put together this history of our profession and those of us who were part of it during our era. Thank you.
You're very welcome.